Happy birthday, NFL. It is hard to believe that 105 years ago, this fabulous football league was formed and it's still going strong to this day. It's hard to believe also that 14 teams started the NFL and two of them are still around to this day. We'll get to that later on in this episode of the Die Hard Football Podcast. It is a special birthday edition as we are celebrating the NFL turning 105 years old on September 17th, 2025. And it's hard to believe that in 1920, the NFL was born. So, without further ado, let's go down memory lane and talk about the timeline of the NFL, with some key moments that have shaped the NFL today. As mentioned earlier, on September 17th, 1920, the NFL was formed. But it wasn't the NFL like we know it today. It was the American Professional Football Conference, and then it was renamed to the American Professional Football Association. The season started with 14 teams, two of which are still competing to this day. Those are the Arizona Cardinals and the Chicago Bears. The Arizona Cardinals first played in Chicago as the Chicago Cardinals, and the Chicago Bears started their franchise as the Decatur Staleys. On September 26, 1920, a week later, the first official game between the St. Paul Ideals, who weren't part of the NFL at that time, competed against the Rock Island Independents. Rock Island pretty much won that game single-handedly with a final score of 48-0. In 1933, the NFL introduced divisions along with the first league championship game. The Bears defeated the Giants. A year later, the first game was played on Thanksgiving. In 1936, 2 years after the Thanksgiving introduction in the NFL, the first ever NFL draft was held. Philadelphia, the Eagles, they had the first ever pick, and they chose Jay Branger, Banger. In 1939, the NFL team faced the Philadelphia Eagles in the first televised NFL game. And it's hard to believe that the league started in 1920, and basically 19 years later, the NFL got their first TV appearance. I mean, talk about innovation in 1943 during World War II. Eagles and the Steelers didn't have enough players to field individual teams, so they joined forces and became the Steagles for at least a season, and then they broke apart again, making that friendly rivalry that we know and love today. In 1949, the NFL merged with the AAFC and brought along the 49ers, Cleveland Browns, and the Baltimore Colts joining the NFL. In 1956, the first NFL championship game was broadcasted between the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears. 1960, The AFL, American Football League, was formed and they had 8 teams. 6 years later, the two, AFL and NFL, would agree to merge, and that would be in 1970. In 1967, Super Bowl I was played between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. Everybody knows that the Green Bay Packers won not only the first Super Bowl, but the second Super Bowl. Not only was the merger in 1970, but ABC airs the first ever Monday Night Football game. It's hard to believe that Monday Night Football is an institution nowadays. 2 years later, in 1972, the Miami Dolphins were undefeated throughout the regular season and postseason and won the Super Bowl, becoming the first and currently only team to hold such a record. In 1980, the NFL draft, which was normally held behind closed doors, well, now they get their own spotlight, as this would be the first year the NFL would broadcast the NFL draft. And of course, it was held or shown on ESPN. In 1982, the NFL was on strike for a little bit. They did get off the season, however, they had 9 games to play. In the middle of the night in 1984, the then Baltimore Colts decided to move out of town and go to Indianapolis, Indiana, where they will now become the Colts. 4 years later, in 1988, with the help of legendary coach and broadcaster John Madden, EA Sports would launch the Madden NFL video game franchise. It had its up and downs at the beginning, but hey, it's still going strong today. And who knows what levels it could go to now. In 1993, that is the year I was born, and there's 2 improvement additions to the game that makes it what it is today. And you can probably thank Dallas Cowboys owner and general manager Jerry Jones for this. The NFL introduced free agency and the salary cap. Why, Jerry? Why did you introduce the salary cap? He mentioned many times that he would have enough money to pay any player he wants and pretty much at any cost he wants. But yet you introduced the salary cap. And before that, teams could keep any player they want. Well, it doesn't make sense why you would introduce the free agency period. The NFL introduced free agency and the salary cap. Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers were both introduced as expansion teams in 1995. 2001 also saw the expansion team of the Houston Texans. In relation to the Houston Oilers, the Oilers were moved to Tennessee, where they're now the Titans. But in 2001, a show that we love to watch during preseason was put on our screens. Thanks to HBO, they produced Hard Knocks. Basically, an inside look at training camp, where each year a team would be featured, and we will get to see the ups and downs of training camp and preseason on their way of building their season roster and building the team. I believe, if I remember right, the inaugural team in 2001 was the Baltimore Ravens. Now, just like the Madden franchise, HBO has their own curse, I guess, where teams don't perform well after being featured on Hard Knocks as their stats, or they just outright get hurt. That could be featured on another episode. In 2004, the beloved NFL Network launched, where they will be broadcasting NFL games and events like the NFL Combine, NFL Draft, and all of that. A couple of things happened in 2007. First off, the first international series game was held at Wembley Stadium between the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants. It was a sloppy game. It wasn't as big as it is today, but it did springboard the international series, where now not only do we have it in London, but we're getting it in Dublin, Ireland, Germany, and I think next year in Australia. Oh, we're getting it in Brazil. I think one year we had it in Mexico City. So 2007 was a big year for the international series. Also in 2007, we had the New England Patriots. They were trying to become an undefeated team. They're one game close. They went to the Super Bowl, faced Eli Manning, Michael Strahan, and the New York Giants. Unfortunately, they lost, and they ended up not going 18-0. They went 17-1. In 2010, the NFL draft was moved to prime time after being morning afternoon event. 2011, we had the start of the season delayed, but it was completed. 2020, you had the COVID-19 pandemic, no fans in attendance. We saw Tampa Bay win their Super Bowl with Tom Brady. Who would have thought that? Looking back, and then in 2021, we had the NFL regular season expand from 16 games to 17 games, or in this case, 17 weeks to 18 weeks when you include the bye in there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the timeline of the 105 years of the NFL. Once again, happy birthday, NFL. You're starting off 2025 with a bang and continue 105 more years. Make sure to tune in to Die Hard Football. Get your podcast. Make sure to tune in to Primetime Blitz over on the Coast to Coast Entertainment Network, breaking down the week's games and so much more. So with that, enjoy the football.